Hey guys, tonight we drift under a violet-hued canopy of dusk, your eyelids heavy as the world outside hushed into a soft murmur. You trace the outline of ancient manuscripts in your mind, feeling the dust tickle your senses, and realize you're about to wander somewhere perilous. You probably won't survive this deep dive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. To post your location and local time down below so we can map the world's collective slumber as we explore together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle into your pillows, the mattress sighing beneath you, as you imagine a single lost volume tucked behind layers of leather and ink. In the hush of your bedroom, you're drawn to a book that once stood shoulder to shoulder with Genesis and Psalms before slipping into legend. Mainstream scholars nod that Genesis mentions Enoch, a man who walked with God and then vanished, Genesis 5:24. That brief verse stands like a breadcrumb marking the threshold to a vast, uncharted realm. You can almost feel the amber glow of candlelight flickering across cracked vellum pages. Fringe enthusiasts whisper that Enoch authored the world's first alchemy manual, teaching kings how to turn lead into gold during Babylonian feasts. It's delightfully absurd, is it? Historians still argue whether such sensational claims ever had roots in genuine folk traditions or were simply the product of medieval daydreams. A cool breeze drifts by, pouring the faint scent of ancient cedar from forgotten scroll chests. You imagine dusty scribes hunched over their desks in Jerusalem temple annexes, pen nibs scratching the earliest summaries of angelic hierarchies. Some legends say these scribes heard whispers from Enoch himself, his voice echoing through cracked stone corridors. Your pulse thumps softly in your ears as you wonder what truths lie buried beneath layers of ecclesiastical politics and theological gatekeeping. You can practically taste the tension when early bishops held heated debates over which writings conveyed divine inspiration and which merely peddled sensational visions of celestial watchdogs. In that moment, you realize this isn't merely a story about a forgotten prophet. It's a glimpse into power struggles, doctrinal Tetris, where certain pieces were forced out to make the picture neat. You feel the weight of centuries pressing in, reminding you that faith and authority often collide in the most unexpected corners of history. You're suspended between two worlds, the comfortable safety of your blanket and the vertigo of uncharted scriptures. Somewhere in the shadows, the Book of Enoch waits. Fiery chariots, rebellious angels, and apocalyptic warnings penned in trembling script. Fringe pamphlets claim Enoch's descendants still guard his secrets in an undisclosed mountain cave. As you sink deeper into your mattress, you sense that this tale will stretch your beliefs, rattling what you thought you knew about canonical boundaries. We'll trace the path from that fleeting Genesis mention through heated debates in candlelit synods, all the way to the dusty back shelves of 18th century Ethiopian monasteries. Along the way, you'll learn one cruel reality check. Every sacred text is vulnerable to human decisions, power plays, and scribes with sharp scissors. So take a slow breath, feel the cool weight of your blanket pressing down, and prepare to wander that murky threshold. Historians still argue whether the Book of Enoch ever belonged in the official biblical lineup. But tonight, you'll experience why its flickering presence haunted religious scholars for centuries. Asterisk, you blink as the room dims further. The fans. Soft whir slicing through the hush like a gentle Morse code. Your blanket's fabric presses against your arms as you drift deeper into that liminal space where history and mythology collide. Just 2 verses in Genesis mention Enoch. Genesis 5:21-24, and yet that tiny cameo feels like the pollen from a cosmic flower, hinting at far more to come. Mainstream scholars recognize that Genesis places Enoch in the genealogy of Adam, noting he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That phrase, so succinct, it almost feels like a scribal afterthought, has set theologians buzzing for millennia. You imagine ancient readers pausing at that line, eyebrows raised in the candlelight, thinking, wait, what just happened? The brevity of Enoch's mention is almost comical. 2 verses in a book, brimming with names, ages, and begetting rituals. It's like finding a single red M&M in a bag of whites jarring out of place, practically begging for explanation. Fringe. Theorists leap at this discomfort, claiming Enoch's vanishing act was a cover-up for his literal alien abduction, complete with UFO blueprints hidden in his original scrolls. You smirk at the mental image of Enoch handing E.T. an almanac on angelic protocols. Historians still argue whether that terseness in Genesis reflects a lost source text or a deliberate editorial trick to spark curiosity. Some propose that a fuller account once existed, later excised by redactors anxious to streamline the patriarchal lineage. Others think the redactors left just enough mystery to encourage oral traditions to blossom around. Enoch's fate-like cosmic cliffhangers passed, from mouth to ear, across generations, as you settle further. The scent of lavender from your diffuser mingles with thoughts of ancient scribes. You almost taste the ink they used iron gall, harsh and metallic. It must have temps afterward, like forgetting to rinse your mouth after brushing. These scribes meticulously copied genealogies, and yet they paused at Enoch, deliberately stretching time. Some suspect they glimpsed material in their hands that felt too dangerous to commit in full. One quirky manuscript, Marginalia, shows Enoch inscribing celestial charts on temple walls using an early form of chalk embedded with ground starlight, because why not claim cosmic dust as the writing medium? That elaborate detail pops up in a 7th century commentary, complete with a doodle of a bearded man wearing oversized goggles. You chuckle, picturing Enoch fumbling with a chalkboard eraser like a medieval science teacher. Scholarly debate grows tighter. Did the original Hebrews include Enoch's visions in their oral lore? Or did those visions originate later in sects, like the Essenes, who thrived in the Judean desert? Historians still argue whether the Enoch tradition was a mainstream thread or a fringe tapestry woven by separatist communities longing for more elaborate divine revelations. The wider canon of Genesis moves on briskly. Enoch's son, Methuselah, famed for his 969-year lifespan, then Lamech, and so forth. Yet, that abrupt shift feels like the night sky skipping an entire constellation. You empathize with later readers, leafing through those pages, startled by the sudden disappearance of a man who never tasted death in the narrative. It's as if someone photoshopped him out of the lineage chart. Leaving a transparent silhouette, you stretch one arm, feeling the cool air ripple across your skin, and ponder how 2 verses launched 1,000 theories. That fleeting mention of Enoch has propelled theologians, mystics, and conspiracy buffs into feverish speculation. It's almost criminal that we get so little, like being handed half a jigsaw puzzle and told the rest was too hot to handle. In the quiet, you're left with a simple question echoing in the stillness. What stories lay dormant behind those few words? The text itself provides no answers, only a tantalizing nudge. And as the ceiling fan hums its lullaby, you can feel the weight of that gap stretching across centuries, begging to be filled. You shift as the fan hums a whisper that feels almost conspiratorial, urging you deeper into the tangled web of oral memories. You remember that fleeting Genesis cameo, 2 verses, barely enough to catch a breath, and now you're chasing echoes, past mouth to ear like secret Morse code. Fringe storytellers delight in painting Enoch as the world's first Skywalker, sending a spiral staircase of stars into God's private observatory. Mainstream scholars, however, confirm that fragments of Enoch's visions surfaced among the Dead Sea Scrolls, cementing his role in early Jewish apocalyptic thought. In remote desert camps, Bedouin guides once whispered that their grandfathers told of a man who walked straight up into the firmament, leaving footprints scorched into sandstone. You almost feel the grit beneath your palms as you imagine those desert winds, hot enough to melt glass, but cool enough at night for stories to thrive. Some tales claim Enoch bore a lantern made of meteorite iron, its glow guiding lost caravans across dunes. Historians still argue whether these Bedouin legends stem from genuine pre-Christian folklore or later romantic inventions by wandering treasure hunters. An argument as shaky as that nightstand you keep bumping into. You catch a whiff of sandalwood from a candle you lit earlier, mixing with a dusty aftertaste of imagination. Fringe aficionados swear Enoch taught ancient Babylonian astronomers the secret of predicting lunar eclipses by reading the shimmer on dragon scales. Quibble that with your local astrologer, if you dare. Meanwhile, mainstream evidence points to early Hellenistic Jewish writers who quoted Enoch's warnings about fallen angels corrupting humans, polishing his transmission with Greek literary flair. There's something intoxicating about oral traditions. They morph, amplify, fragment, then circle back like a cosmic game of telephone. One Syrian monk's marginal note from the 6th century claims, Enoch's ascent was so dazzling the cherubim swooned like bystanders at an epic fireworks display. You laugh softly, picturing angelic creatures fanning themselves with trumpets. That doodle in the margin even shows a cherub wiping brow beads. It's clearly a very dramatic choir as you sink into the plush embrace of your blanket. You recall a memory of late-night reading by flashlight in college. The storyteller claimed a Bedouin caravan once encountered a stargate in a canyon carved with Enoch, a seal that opened only under the light of a blue moon. It's the sort of whimsical lore that makes archaeologists sigh and retract their maps. Historians still argue whether Enoch's seal ever existed outside those desert tall tales, or if it's pure campsite fantasy concocted to justify marshmallow toasting breaks. You feel a cool spot at the nape of your neck, where a drop of sweat formed as you ponder these legends. It's funny to think how oral accounts can outlast marble temples. One fringe pamphlet jokes that Enoch's true secret was teaching cave dwellers the first shampoo recipe: crushed lotus petals and goat's milk. You nearly snort at the mental image of goats grinning and bearing milk mustaches. Yet, amidst the playful exaggerations, there's a kernel of historical gravity. 2nd century Jewish historian Josephus mentions a Book of the Watchers detailing angelic fallenness, which scholars believe echoes Enoch's work. That mainstream nod gives weight to the idea that Enoch's lore might have been more than bedtime fables. It suggests a living oral tradition weaving through days of temple rituals, Sabbath gatherings, and clandestine study groups in Qumran where scrolls were meticulously hidden in cliffside jars. You press your ear against the mattress, hearing the fan's rhythm shift like a narrative beat drop. You recall the candle's soft glow during section 2, now replaced by a stereo of insect chirps from your open window. Those chirps remind you of nighttime desert cicadas singing alongside storytellers who refuse to let Enoch vanish completely. Some say his disciples recited his visions in the tongues of every conquered nation, from Aramaic to Latin, each translation adding a new sparkle or wrinkle to the tale. It's remarkable how oral history stakes a claim on memory. In one Iraqi village, elders still point to a weathered stone slab said to bear Enoch's sandals in print, though it's as flat and weathered as a pancake. You grin, imagining archaeologists arriving in full gear only to find a tourist trap selling authentic Enoch footprints as fridge magnets. That pancake rock alongside the lamp made of meteorite iron, illustrates the swirling dance between fact and fancy. You chew on that tension, feeling your eyelids grow heavier. You think about those dusty scroll chests in Qumran. How scribes may have passed stories around flickering lamps before committing them to ink. Fangirl-level collectors in the 19th century chased rumors of Enoch's original parchment, offering European art dealers extravagant, some innovative financing that would make modern movie studios weep. Yet skeptics retreat behind locked archives, dusty critical editions, and dry philological footnotes. They argue that oral legends of Enoch's ascent simply reflect widespread Near Eastern motifs of divine journeys. Compare Gilgamesh's underworld trip or Utnapishtim's boat ride through apocalyptic floodwaters. Historians still argue whether Enoch's narrative is a unique revelation or a syncretic remix of those older epics. Of course, you lean into that argument, picturing a cosmic DJ scratching the grooves of Babylonian tablets. You shift again, mindful of your calloused feet pressing against the sheath's comfort and curiosity warring within you. Those oral traditions kept Enoch alive long before parchment ever dried. They were whispered under olive trees, rehearsed in empty synagogues, and shouted by prophets perched atop rocky outcrops. And because they thrived outside official channels, they possessed a freedom that scriptural orthodoxy could never quite snuff out. Now, in the hush of your room, you're left holding these fragmented echoes like brittle leaves you've gathered on a woodland path. You recognize the playful margin doodles, the pancake rocks, the meteorite lampsol weaving a tapestry that's as intoxicating as it is elusive. Tonight, you felt the spin-dingle of oral legends nudging you toward the stars, reminding you that memory is mutable, that stories can flutter like moths around any flame, however official or occult. And with that, you settle back, your heart thrumming to the rhythm of unscripted lore, your thoughts echoing the Bedouin caravans, the Syrian monks, and the Qumran scribes, all united by a single thread, the urge to keep Enoch's cosmic ascent alive in whispered traditions that defied time itself. You wake to the fan's gentle hum and the lingering aroma of sandalwood, grounded by the memory of Bedouin sandstorms and pancake rock footprints. Now imagine yourself in the dimly lit halls of an Ethiopian monastery in the highlands of place, where mist curls around ancient stone staircases and prayer flags ripple like spectral echoes. It's 1773, and you're following the footsteps of a daring Scottish explorer named James Bruce, whose journals crackle with the promise of buried scripture. Mainstream historians note that Bruce returned to Europe with several GS manuscripts, containing portions of the Book of Enoch, introducing Western scholars to a text long thought lost to time. You almost taste the crisp, chill air of Gondor, Ethiopia's former capital, where Bruce first glimpsed the volumes hidden in the rafters of a monastic scriptorium. Candlelight danced across inked pages as you imagine Bruce's amazement, scribbling notes by the glow of a brass lamp. Fringe lore claims that those very manuscripts were bound in unicorn hide, and that if you left them on your desk overnight, the faded letters would reassemble themselves into new prophecies. You snort at the image unicorn. Hide is definitely a flexible term, but you can't help smiling at the mystique. Historians still argue whether these claims sprang from playful monks looking to ward off curious eyes, or from true magical traditions embedded in Ethiopian Christianity. The mainstream tale is tantalizing enough. Bruce's arrival in an eclipse-shadowed landscape, local monks eyeing his tall frame with suspicion. The thunder of Highland boots echoing through sacred libraries. He bartered fashionably embroidered cloth for their most treasured scrolls, negotiating in broken Amharic, peppered with Gaelic. You almost hear the clang of brass pots from the monastery kitchen as monks prepared their evening tea, casting furtive glances at Bruce's satchel. unexpectedly. One quirky detail surfaces in his diaries: a haunted hyena test, according to Bruce. Skeptical scribes once locked a manuscript in a wooden chest and fed it to a caged hyena, reasoning that a false text would provoke a rage so unnatural the beast would howl for days. Supposedly, the hyena merely gnawed around the hinges and fell asleep, snoring like a freight train. You grin at the absurdity of IT proofreading taken to a whole new level. Inside those GS parchments, your senses tingle at the richness of the script. The vellum is cool under your fingertips, each page laid out in 2 columns, the text framed by marginal illustrations of winged watchers. Some drawings even show cherubim playing lyres next to roaring lions, an image that conjures a medieval rock concert. Mainstream scholarship confirms that these manuscripts date to around the 15th century CE. It's copied from earlier exemplars that may vanish today, but there's debate at every turn. Historians still argue whether the Enoch text, Cruse uncovered, descended in a direct line from the original 2nd century KCE compositions, or whether it passed through generations of Ethiopian scribes who introduced local traditions and embellishments. You imagine marginal notes in ancient Amharic suggesting the Watchers invented coffee to lure humans into prolonged theological debates, an origin story that would explain a lot about modern academic seminars. Bruce's journey didn't end in Gondor. You follow him into the jagged Simeon Mountains, where high-altitude winds whip manuscripts like banners. One fringe account claims that Bruce climbed to a hidden chapel carved into volcanic rock and watched in awe as ghostly friars appeared in his lantern's beam to chant the Enochian verses. Those are the sorts of details you tuck into your mental scrapbook, grinning at their theatrical flair while knowing full well they could be teenage monk pranks. By the time Bruce reached the port of Massawa, the sun had bleached his beard nearly white, and dozens of local porters staggered under crates full of scrolls. You can almost feel the sweat seeping through your shirt as they hoisted those crates onto camels, each mammal looking bewildered by the weight of centuries. Bruce insisted on examining every page before allowing any scroll to depart, he claimed. The ink smelled of frankincense and spilled starlight. You roll your eyes at that poetic flourish, but find yourself captivated by the notion that a script could exude cosmic fragrance. Once, back in Britain, Bruce's reports caused a sensation. Scholars crowded around his leather-bound volumes, quills at the ready. Yet not everyone was convinced. A London eccentric published a pamphlet arguing that Bruce had actually discovered the diaries of an Ethiopian goat herder named Enoch. It's misheard by Bruce's confused guides. You laugh at the image of goats signing treaties and nibbling on vellum, but you also understand the impulse to cast doubt on such tantalizing finds. Historians still argue whether the skeptics were motivated by genuine philological concerns or sheer envy. At Bruce's Himalayan scale adventure, Bruce's manuscripts eventually fell into the hands of Richard Lawrence, an English archdeacon who translated them into Latin and then English, publishing the first Western translation of 1 Enoch in 1821. Mainstream accounts highlight Lawrence's meticulous scholarship. He compared multiple GS copies, annotated variant readings, and even noted a textual glitch where a line about the flood resembled a recipe for Ethiopian injera. You chuckle, picturing the mixing of sacred verse and sourdouch. Meanwhile, fringe commentators speculate that Lawrence discovered a hidden layer of text beneath the visible Inca cipher, revealing Enoch's secret method for reanimating mummy wrappings into protective amulets. They assert he deliberately suppressed those pages to avoid unleashing undead seraphim upon London's fog-choked streets. You tuck this into your mental vault of improbable lore, amused by the theatrical stakes. Despite the dramatic lore, the rediscovery is no mere tall tale. Those GS manuscripts remain the earliest complete witnesses of the Book of Watchers, offering a glimpse into Second Temple Judaism's apocalyptic imagination. Their arrival in Europe sparked a flood of interest. Theologians lectured, apothecaries sold scroll fragments as hangover cures, and dramatists penned Enoch-themed operas brimming with flaming chariots. Through the haze of sandalwood and candle soot, you see how Bruce's Hall ignited an entire field of Enochic studies. Scholars pieced together the Watchers' catalog, debated the Enochian calendar's 364-day year versus the lunar cycles, and pondered why these visions were excluded from most Bibles. Historians still argue whether the Ethiopian Church's preservation of Enoch reflects a unique theological thread or simply a fortunate quirk of geography. Now, as your eyelids flutter at the edges of consciousness, you sense the weight of those GS folios in your hands, manuscripts that traveled across mountains, seas, and centuries to whisper Enoch's cosmic secrets back into the world. You imagine the rotating rafters of that Ethiopian scriptorium, the monk's furtive glances, Bruce's astonished roar as he read about fallen angels, and Lawrence's quill scratching furiously into the night. You exhale, feeling the blanket's gentle pressure, your heart thrumming in sync with the fan. The rediscovery of the Book of Enoch was no quiet archival happenstance. It was a thunderclap that shattered academic complacency and forced Western scholarship to confront a text heavy with celestial rebellion. As you drift, that thunderclap echoes softly in your mind, reminding you that sometimes the most explosive revelations arrive bound in leather and scribed with meteor dust ink. You blink as the ceiling fan hums you back into the cool, dim glow of your bedroom, scented faintly with cedar and old paper. Imagine yourself stepping into a bustling Judean scriptorium around 100 BCE, where sunlight filters through narrow windows, illuminating rows of wooden desks topped with inkpots and stacked vellum scrolls. Here, Jewish scribes handle Enochic fragments with reverence, copying passages by hand in meticulous square Aramaic letters. Mainstream scholars confirm that scraps of 1 Enoch, especially the Book of Watchers, were discovered among the dead. See scrolls at Qumran, showing early Jewish communities valued Enoch's apocalypse narratives alongside Torah texts. Dot your fingertips, almost feel the rough texture of parchment as you watch a scribe dip his reed pen into iron gall ink. The metallic temps lingering in the air like overbrewed tea. He pauses at a verse describing Enoch's journey through the firmament, his breath fogging the surface of the scroll. Fringe lore claims some scribes whispered protective incantations over each copied line, believing the ink was enchanted by fallen angelic residue. You can't help but grin at the image of a monk muttering, "May these watchers not watch me back," while flicking his quill like a broken conductor's baton. Historians still argue whether such superstitions were limited to fringe sects or widespread among mainstream copysts. In this scriptorium, the air vibrates with debate. One elder scribe, scroll balanced on his forearm, insists Enoch's visions of cosmic judgment derive from authentic oral traditions passed down since Solomon's temple days. Another argues that passages on the heavenly luminaries bear unmistakable Hellenistic literary flair, betraying later Greek redaction. The tension crackles like static electricity in your Heron academic voltage you never thought you'd witness firsthand. While these debates swirl, the scribes proceed to embed Enochic excerpts into other texts. You hear the scratch of stylus on wax tablet as a junior clerk drafts passages from the Book of Jubilees, where Enoch's teachings on the calendrical year and angelic hierarchies are quoted verbatim. Mainstream historians note that Jubilees, long revered in some Jewish circles, often treats Enoch as an authoritative patriarch who transmits divine secrets. You lean closer, smelling the heady mix of papyrus dust and the monk's overly ambitious frankincense burner, whose resinous plumes cloud the room. Fringe rumor holds that certain scrolls were guarded by chained temple dogs, descendants of Leviathan's cosmic watchdogs, strained to growl if any fragment carried forbidden knowledge of God's throne room. You picture a scraggly hound yanking at its chain, tongue lolling. It's trying to snap at a fluttering scrap of papyrus like a deranged poodle chasing a boomerang. Despite the theatrics, these scribes venerated Enoch. They inscribed his apocalyptic visions on temple walls, sealed them in clay jars for safekeeping, and used his judgments to guide ritual purity laws. One tablet even records that priests consulted Enoch's calendar to schedule festivals, believing his 364-day solar cycle kept the sacrificial routines perfectly aligned with heaven's clockwork. Historians still argue whether this calendrical system ever supplanted the lunar sabbatical reckoning in mainstream temple practice or remained confined to desert sects. You imagine crowds gathering at twilight in Jerusalem's outer courts, listening as itinerant preachers recite Enoch's warnings about watcher angels mating with human women to produce monstrous giants. The audience might have shivered, clutching their woolen cloaks, as new moon stars winked overhead. Fringe pamphlets sent scribes running for their quills claim those giants later taught humanity how to brew beer secret Enoch didn't favor, arguing it dulled prophetic vision. You almost hear the scribes muttering, "Blessed are the sober." In the scriptorium, a pair of twin brothers, one ambitiously, sloppy, argue over variant readings. One brother reads that Enoch saw the ends of the earth, while his twin's version says Enoch saw the fiends of the earth. The sloppy copyist defends his slip as a deeper truth. Humans wrestle inner demons every bit as much as cosmic forces. You stifle a chuckle at the idea that a scribal typo might birth a whole new interpretive tradition. Amid this fervor, a leather-bound codex emerges, bearing the rubric Enoch Hanavi in pale ink. Its black goatskin cover bears strange embossed symbols, rumored by fringe collectors to be reverse-engineered diacritics from fallen angels' own alphabet. You brush your fingers over the embossed patterns, feeling the slight ridges like braille messages from beyond. Historians still argue whether the codex is a genuine Second Temple artifact or a later forgery crafted to appease collectors hungry for esoteric rarities. You lean back against a wooden bench, feeling its uneven surface pressing into your shoulder blades. The head scribe's tool chest lies open, revealing a curious assortment: burnt ostrich eggshells for ink polishing, vials of gold dust to highlight divine names, and a small sealed jar labeled "Dust from Enoch's Tomb, keep out of direct sunlight." You squint at the tiny script, wondering if it's practical or simply the scribe's last wink at posterity. Maybe it's just sand from a local shrine. Throughout the centuries, Jewish scribes continued to quote Enochic texts in liturgies and theological treatises. The historian Philo of Alexandria references heavenly mysteries entrusted to our ancestor Enoch, while later rabbinic glosses in the Talmud brush past those mysteries with an almost conspiratorial wink. Mainstream scholarship acknowledges these nods but notes that rabbinic authorities rarely engage Enoch directly in halakhic debates, suggesting a cautious reverence tinged with uncertainty. As your eyelids grow heavier, you picture the scriptoriums, iron hinges groaning as a breeze stirs the prayer shawls hung on pegs. It's near sundown. The scribes will soon fold their parchments, extinguish the lamps, and recline to recite psalms by torchlight. You catch a final glimpse of the fragile scroll fragments bundled neatly, one bearing Enoch's cosmic witness, ready to be inhaled. By centuries of seekers, you stretch a hand toward your bedside lamp, flicking the switch to dim the glow. The fan's hum rises in prominence, a modern echo of quills scratching ancient vellum. You've seen how early Jewish scribes treated Enoch's revelations with a blend of awe and skepticism. weaving them into liturgical practice while quietly wrestling with their provenance. The scent of cedar and saffron lingers at your nostrils, a final reminder of that moment when sacred text and human doubts shared the same parchment. Your mind drifts to those chained temple dogs and meteor lamp manuscripts. The twins' typo that birthed new demonology. The jar labeled dust from Enoch's tomb, all quirky contrasts to the earnest copying of divine secrets. You realize that from the very start, Enoch's words hovered between orthodoxy and controversy. A theological tightrope that taught scribes to wield both reverence and critical scrutiny. As you sink back against your pillows, the margin of sleep beckons. Scholars still argue whether Enoch's visions ever held a central place in mainstream Judaism or remained the cherished esoterica of desert sects. Yet you know this much. The scribes' quills carried more than ink. They carried the weight of secrets too potent for casual belief. And now, under the soft hum of your fan, you feel the world of second-century Jerusalem slip away, leaving only the fragile echo of Enoch's enigmatic legacy glowing in the dark. You shift under your blanket as the fan's hum becomes a steady heartbeat, lulling you back to a flickering bronze lamp in the Basilica of Alexandria. Imagine the cool, resinous scent of frankincense curling through cavernous arches, mingling with the dust of ancient scrolls stacked on marble lecterns. In this grand hall, early Christian scholars gathered to debate Scripture's boundaries, eagerly quoting Enoch's Angels and Giants saga as if binge-watching their favorite mystery series. Mainstream historians note that Origen c. 1852-53 CE referenced the Book of Enoch by name in his commentary on Genesis, treating its apocalyptic visions as valuable commentary on the fall of the Watchers. He argued that Enoch's account enriched the biblical narrative by illuminating Genesis 6's cryptic Sons of God reference. You can almost hear Origen's quill scratching across parchment, the echo ricocheting off polished stone like a distant percussion track. Subtle breeze rustles the yellowing pages of Tertullian's writings in your mind, where he describes Enoch as a divinely inspired father of prophets, using the text to bolster Christian teachings on angelic hierarchy. He argued that the Watcher's corruption explained the origins of demonic forces, an explanation as satisfying as finally labeling your nightmares. Historians still argue whether Tertullian's eagerness sprang from genuine conviction or a strategic bid to distinguish Christianity from Jewish traditions. You picture Clement of Alexandria pacing before his students, gesturing toward Enoch's vision of heavenly tablets that recorded human deeds. His voice reverberates through columned corridors as he extolled Enoch's prophetic authority, claiming Enoch walked across the cosmos like a pilgrim in sandals, glowing with starlight. Fringe lore claims Clement owned a signet ring carved with Enoch's seal, which he believed warded off demonic whispers during all-night study sessions. Though skeptics suggest it was simply a fashionable trinket he picked up at the port. The scent of beeswax candles mingles with the temps of dried ink as you imagine Justin Martyr c. 100 to 165 CE, defending Christian doctrine before Roman magistrates. He cited Enoch's prophecies to argue that Christ's incarnation was foretold long before any gospel narratives existed. You almost feel the tremor in your voice as you imagine standing trial, quoting verses about heavenly luminaries, two Cicero-appointed judges who probably thought angelology was as obscure as quantum physics. Amid these theological feats, enthusiasts whisper that Hippolytus possessed a fragment of Enoch's original scroll, concealed inside his bishop's crozier. They claim the crozier's tip radiated faint blue light whenever heretical ideas neared, alerting Hippolytus to doctrinal threats like a mystical metal detector. You grin at the idea, picturing Hippolytus swinging his staff at error like a medieval Gandalf. Historians still argue whether such relic stories reflect actual early Christian practice or later. Medieval embellishments designed to glamorize church relic collections. Beneath the basilica's mosaic ceiling, it's the sedge-like rustle of parchment sounds like nighttime rain on your windowpane. You listen as Origen debates whether Enoch's 364-day calendar was divinely ordained or a sectarian curiosity. This discussion feels eerily like today's podcast hosts dissecting alternate histories. Scholars still debate whether early Christians embraced Enoch wholesale or adopted only selective excerpts that aligned with emerging Christological themes. Beyond the learned treatises, you almost taste the waxy residue on Eusebius's scrolls. This church historian mentioned Enoch indirectly when chronicling forgotten prophetic forerunners. He noted that some congregations read Enoch alongside Ezekiel, enjoying tales of celestial chariots until church authorities frowned upon them. Fringe tales suggest Eusebius tried translating Enoch's Aramaic into Latin using an enchanted telescope, though it's more likely he owned a primitive spyglass brought from Alexandria's bustling port. You feel the cool marble floor beneath your palms as you kneel beside Jerome's study where he labored over his Latin Vulgate. He admitted struggling to integrate Enoch's text, dismissing it as profane yet unable to ignore its theological allure. You almost hear Jerome muttering, "Why must this scrawl on parchment tempt me so?" Historians still argue whether Jerome's disdain for Enoch reflected personal bias or a broader ecclesiastical directive to tighten the canon amid flickering torchlight. You imagine the intimate gatherings of Montanist prophets in Phrygia, eagerly chanting Enoch's warnings about the end times. They believed the Book of Watchers announced Montanus's own prophetic commission, fueling both fervor and scandal like those true crime obsessions you sneak watch at 2 a.m. Fringe assertions claim these prophets carved Enoch's words onto subterranean temple walls using charcoal mixed with dragon's blood resin for added potency. Scholars still debate whether Montanus' interest in Enoch was a genuine return too early Christian roots or a fringe stunt to shock the mainstream. Through it all, the mainstream church grappled with authority. You sense the tension in your chest as bishops convened, quoting Enoch's vivid imagery of giant spirits and celestial tablets. Then pausing to wonder if admitting such tales risked blurring the line between scripture and myth. They scribbled margin notes, some praising Enoch as worthy of belief, others warning that his candor on angelic debasement could ignite heretical fires. You're aware that these debates mirror modern scholars parsing newly discovered Dead Sea Scrolls fragments, excitement tempered by caution. A distant choir chant drifts through the marble colonnade in your mind, blending with the fan's whisper in your room. You catch a glimpse of Chrysostom delivering a sermon where he invoked Enoch's righteous walk through realms of light, encouraging listeners to emulate that divine pilgrimage. Fringe remarkers suggest Chrysostom also secretly appended Enochic verses to Paul's letters, creating an early form of biblical mashup. You can't help but chuckle at the notion of epistolary fanfiction in late antiquity as the candles gutter. You lean back against a polished pew, feeling the smooth solidity of institutional faith pressed against the slippery questions Enoch raised. Through Origen's endorsements, Tertullian's seal, and the hushed rumors of glowing signet rings, Enoch's Book of Watchers claimed a dynamic role in early Christian thoughts, sometimes embraced, sometimes feared for its cosmic boldness. And just as your eyelids grow heavy, you sense the ancient debates still stirring in your sleep. Historians still argue whether the Church Fathers' enthusiasm for Enoch represented an early openness to apocalyptic imagination or a fleeting fascination quickly extinguished by concerns over doctrinal purity. Yet tonight, you've walked the marble floors of Alexandria's basilica, smelled the frankincense haze, and heard the quill-scratch echo of those first. Christian thinkers wrestling with a text that blended divine revelation and cosmic rebellion in equal measure. You stir as the fan hums a gentle wake-up call, the hum echoing like a distant murmur from ancient council chambers. Your blanket's texture feels suddenly heavier, almost conspiratorial-like. It knows you're about to witness a shake-up in Scripture's hierarchy. Imagine leather-bound volumes lining shelf after shelf in the bishop's study, each spine stamped with titles of accepted and disputed texts. In the mid-3rd century, Eusebius of Caesarea sorted Christian writings into 3 categories: recognized, disputed, and outright heretical, his ecclesiastical history. He placed the Book of Enoch among the disputed works, signaling the first institutional hesitation about its canonical status. You can almost smell the mingled odors of waxed, parchment, and melting candle drippings as you picture Eusebius dipping his quill into ink that tastes of ash and olive oil residue. Fringe gossip claims that he performed a midnight ritual, dipping an Enochic fragment into holy water and then into vinegar to see which liquid would make the ink glow, divine endorsement or diabolical trick. You grin at the image of Eusebius, peering through a makeshift magnifying glass, eager to catch a flicker of celestial light. Historians still argue whether Eusebius's disputed label reflected genuine textual concerns or a political move to consolidate authority over emerging Christian orthodoxy. You shift on your pillow, feeling the plush fabric conform to your elbow as you imagine local bishops whispering in secret scribal rooms. One synod in Laodicea, around 363 CE, issued a decree that forbade congregations from reading Jewish fables and Syriac mysteries in church phrases thought to target Enoch's cosmic tales. The council's canons never explicitly named Enoch, but they effectively barred it and similar apocalyptic works. Mainstream records confirm that the Laodicean canon excluded Enoch, reflecting a growing unease with its sensational portrayals of giant spirits and fiery chariots. Yet these were murky waters. You detect a subtle chill, like someone dimmed the torchlight just a notch when you picture bishops casting uneasy glances at the Book of Watchers. Fringe anecdotes suggest one elderly prelate had Enoch's pages sealed inside a glass vial and wore it as a talisman, convinced the text offered protection against plague-bearing demons. You smirk at the thought of a bishop doubling as a walking holy supply store. Historians still argue whether such reliquarying prelates were sincere believers or simply eccentric clerics craving legendary status. You lean closer to your nightstand, feeling the cool edge of your phone pressing into your palm as if waiting to capture every whispered detail. In North Africa, the influential Bishop Cyprian casually referenced a prophetic Book of Enoch in a letter but admitted he preferred sticking to widely acknowledged scriptures when preaching. That tacit admission implies a nuanced stance. Enoch could be read privately, but not proclaimed from the pulpit. This private versus public divide marks one of the earliest documented tensions over Enoch's place in the communal canon. A soft chime from your phone reminds you how often you scroll through modern articles debating religious authenticity. Back then, bishops depended on brittle scrolls, not smartphones. But they faced the same dilemma: which texts carried divine weight and which veered into sensational speculation. You almost taste the iron Thames of their ink each time they labeled a text antilegomena spoken against, including Enoch's vivid prophecy of meteor showers and angelic courts. A fringe tradition holds that each time someone pronounced anti-legomena, nearby oils would sizzle proof of celestial disapproval, or a priest with an overactive scent warmer. You press a knuckle against your temple, feeling the quilt's softness giving way to your growing curiosity. Athanasius of Alexandria, in his famous 39th Festal letter of 367 CE, listed the exact books deemed canonical 42 in all land, conspicuously omitted. 1 Enoch. His list later influenced the Western Church's Old Testament lineup. Mainstream. Historians note that Athanasius's explicit exclusion cemented Enoch's disputed status for centuries to come. Then there's Jerome in Bethlehem, wrestling with manuscripts under the dim glow of an oil lamp that smells faintly of goat tallow and rosemary. He translated the Hebrew Bible into Latin, but bypassed Enoch, dismissing it as apocryphal and heretical. Yet a surviving letter reveals Jerome's private fascination. He owned a fragment he called the Curious Parchment, which he kept under lock and key, occasionally leafing through it if insomnia struck. Historians still argue whether Jerome's public rejection masked a deeper respect for Enoch's theological insights or simply complied with ecclesiastical pressure. You feel a sudden weight on your chest, as though the blanket has grown denser, reflecting the heaviness of these decisions. Councils at Hippo 393 CE and Carthage 397 CE ratified lists almost identical to Athanasius's, consistently excluding Enoch. The collective acquiescence of North African bishops signaled that lingering doubts had crystallized into consensus. Mainstream church records show Enoch slipping further into the shadows of the biblical family photo, replaced by Tobit, Judith, and the minor prophets. But the story doesn't end there. You sense the air shift, as later thinkers like Augustine acknowledged Enoch's literary artistry, but warned it could mislead the faithful with excessive angel lore. He argued for caution. Better to trust the canonical prophets than a book swirling with giants and cosmic battles. Fringe enthusiasts retell a tale of Augustine dropping an Enoch scroll in a vat of brine to test if salt water would wash away any demonic enchantments, a sort of early exorcism via pickling. You smile at the absurdity, yet marvel at the lengths they went to wrestle with text. In your quiet room, you picture these bishops: Eusebius, Cyprian, Athanasius, Jerome, Augustine poring over Enoch's words late into the night, wrestling with its promise of divine revelation versus the threat of doctrinal chaos. Meanwhile, humble villagers in Syria might still chant excerpts from Enoch in hidden caves, passing the text hand to hand beneath flickering lantern glow. Historians still argue whether these grassroots readings kept Enoch alive outside official liturgies or simply reflected isolated nostalgia. You rest your head against the pillow, soft fibers cradling your ear as you listen for the fan's lullaby. You've seen the first murmurs of doubt ripple through the church's highest ranks, a tide that turned consensus against Enoch's inclusion. Yet, even as it edged toward exclusion, the book's arresting visions continued to flicker in the dim corners of Christian imagination. And somewhere, beneath layers of parchment and centuries of ecclesiastical rulings, Enoch's words waited for restoration, rebellion, or perhaps a final, whispered reckoning. You sink deeper into your mattress as the fan's soft whir shifts into the low rumble of a gathering storm, mirroring the heated debates unfolding in marble-clad church halls. Imagine yourself amid candlelit synods in the 5th century, where bishops in heavy woolen robes lean over long oak tables, squinting at Latin translations of Enoch's angelic hierarchies. Their murmurs rise and fall like distant thunder, charged with the question, can a text so brimming with rebellious watchers and giant offspring remain in the orbit of orthodoxy? Mainstream records show that by the time of the 6th century decretum, Gelasium 1 Enoch was officially classified as apocryphal, its use forbidden in public readings and liturgy. In that decree, unnamed church authorities cautioned the faithful to avoid books of obscure origin, a thinly veiled reference to Enoch's elaborate descriptions of angelic assemblies and cosmic tribunals. You almost taste the acrid sting of the bishop's incarsh, like burnt coffee grounds mixed with their fear that Enoch's vivid cosmology might eclipse Gospel simplicity. Your senses flicker with the scent of tallow candles melting into puddles on stone floors. Fringe lore insists that some overzealous deacons tried to exorcise Enoch's demonic residue by roasting his vellum pages over a sacrificial fire, believing the smoke would purify errant spirits trapped in the ink. Supposedly, one particularly zealous deacon ended up covered in soot and convinced a stray mouse was whispering watcher secrets. You can't help but grin at the image of a mouse bustling under a bishop's robe, squeaking prophecies about meteor showers. As you nestle your head into the pillow, whispering carpets beneath your hands, you picture bishops arguing over the theological implications of angelic interbreeding. One heavyweight voice, an elderly prelate, whose beard seems carved from alabaster thunders, that Enoch's tale of watchers mating with human women contradicts the Church's teaching on the immateriality of angels. He warns that admitting such corporeal angels could open the door to heretical sects fixated on fleshly rebellions. Historians still argue whether this concern sprang from genuine theological misgivings or political maneuvering to marginalize rival factions. On the opposite side of the chamber, a younger bishop with a voice as smooth as clotted cream defends Enoch as a prophetic authority, citing Tertullian's earlier praise of the text's angelology. He insists that Enoch's detailed catalog of angelic orders clarifies the cosmic framework in which Christ's salvation drama unfolds. He paces before an elaborate mosaic of seraphim, waving a chipped vellum scroll as though conducting an orchestra. You almost hear the soft rustle of his robe brushing marble as he quotes lines about heavenly tablets recording human deeds. Between these two titans, minor voices chime in. A bishop from Gaul, worried that Enoch's descriptions of flaming swords will encourage literal-minded congregants to brandish weapons during processions. Another from Syria, cautioning that Enoch's calendar of 364 days undermines the traditional lunar solar reckoning of the Jewish roots of Christianity. Scholars still debate whether these practical objections reflected widespread pastoral concerns, or were merely excuses to sideline an inconvenient text. A slender deacon leans in, dropping a fringe tidbit into the swirl of conversation. He's heard that in the Egyptian desert, a recluse hermit actually attempted to replicate Enoch's vision by staring at the sun for 40 days straight, hoping to glimpse the throne room of God. They say he fainted after day 7, and thereafter insisted that his hair turn silver from the divine glare. You stifle a laugh, picturing that hermit shielding his eyes and swearing by the archangels as he lumbered back to his cave. That giggle triggers a shift in your awareness. You realize how closely these theological quarrels mirror your own late night scrolls through modern comment sections. Back then, church fathers didn't have Twitter. They had synods and complex Latin treatises. Yet their dilemmas echo yours, protecting tradition, wrestling with new ideas, and deciding which voices carry divine authority. You almost feel the weight of their robes pressing down the collective breath of 100 clerics as they contemplated the risk of endorsing Enoch's sensational imagery. The candles gutter, spitting small droplets of tallow onto wooden pews. You picture one bishop scribbling a furious margin note in his copy of Augustine's works against those who wish to endorse Enoch. Beneath that, someone else has jotted, "Remember the pancake rock footprints?" A private joke recalling earlier Enoch legends that suddenly feels like a secret handshake. Those scribbled notes testify to the tension sacred discourse intertwined with personal jabs. Scholarly rigor laced with human frailty as the debate reaches a crescendo. The senior bishop pounds his Gavala-carved ivory handheld discand, calls for silence. He declares that Enoch's text, while once esteemed by figures like Origen and the Montanist prophets, now poses too many doctrinal pitfalls. He warns that its angelic rebellions could fuel Gnostic claimants who revere secret knowledge above apostolic tradition. Historians still argue whether branding Enoch with Gnostic associations owed more to genuine overlap or to polemical tactics used by Orthodox leaders. A hush settles over the room. It's broken only by the crackle of burning wicks. You sense the shift in atmosphere as Enoch's imagery is recast from prophetic warning to heretical hazard. The bishops vote by raising folded parchments. Silence means exclusion. When the final tally is read, there's a collective exhale. As though the church has closed its shutters against a storm of cosmic rebellion, that exhale reverberates back to your bedroom, where your fan's hum steadies into white noise. Imagine the discarded Enoch scrolls gathering dust in monastic attics. Their ink growing faint, their pages slowly curling at the edges. Yet even as the official verdict echoes through the corridors of church history, you catch a faint echo of Enoch's defiant voice, a reminder that disputes over what counts as sacred truth are never final. You feel the gentle press of your blanket, a soft reassurance after witnessing those high-stakes doctrinal clashes. From the fringe hermits staring at the sun to the bishops smearing margin notes under candlelight, the saga of Enoch's angelology has revealed the precarious balance between divine wonder and institutional authority. And just as your mind drifts toward sleep, you sense that those debates, fierce as they were, couldn't completely snuff out the flicker of Enoch's cosmic visions. You blink against the fan's lullaby. It's carried into a candlelit assembly hall, where rows of cloaked bishops lean in close, their hoods brushing dusty tapestries. You're present at synods that will decide which scrolls deserve eternal honor, and which must be nudged out into obscurity. The year is 393 CE in Hippo Regius, North Africa, humidity clinging to your robes as sweat beads at your hairline. Mainstream records confirm that the Council of Hippo ratified a list of 27 New Testament books and an Old Testament canon, largely echoing Athanasius, omitting Enoch and other apocryphal works. You inhale the heavy scent of melting beeswax dripping from overhead lamps. A blend of sweet honey and acrid smoke like marshmallows burning over a campfire you can never quite reach. Fringe whispers insist that some delegates brought small samples of Enoch's vellum to sniff for angelic residue, believing that true prophecy would exhale a faint scent of frankincense even centuries later. They say one overeager bishop sniffed so deeply he sneezed the entire meeting into chaos. Historians still argue whether such theatrics were genuine tests of authenticity or clever smokescreens to distract from deeper power struggles. As you settle into a carved oak pew, you feel the uneven grain press into your hip like an old friend tapping for attention. You watch as Bishop Augustine strides forward, robe billowing, parchment in hand. He references the Laodicean canon's prohibition against Jewish fables and aligns it with the new Hippo decree, another mainstream marker cementing Enoch's exclusion. A hush falls. Lamps gutter as if flinching from the pronouncement. You almost taste the powdered chalk from the scribe's margins where secret notes are passed among attendants. One such note scribbled in green ink reads, "Did you hear about the deacon who tried reading Enoch upside down to catch hidden messages?" It's an inside joke that makes you smirk in the dim glow. Fringe legend holds that reading the text inverted would reveal instructions for summoning guardian angels to protect you from bad sermon notes. You chuckle at the image of a stoic deacon, twisting a scroll like a bedtime lullaby gone rogue. The council's secretary wraps a slender rod against his lectern, signaling the vote. You see hands rise, each wrapped in spidery veins, bearing rings carved with fish and cross motifs. The tally comes back unanimous. Enoch stays outside the list. You feel a pang as though you watched a childhood friend turn away. But the bishops exchange nods of relief. No more contentious debates over giants' watchers or secret calendars. Then it's off to Carthage in 397 CE, a month's journey across sun-baked plains. You trek alongside caravans carrying clay amphorae of olive oil and bundles of ostrich feather pens, the breeze flicking at your tunic hem. At Carthage, the bishops reconvene, reaffirming Hippo's decisions. Mainstream accounts note that canon 47 explicitly adopted the same books, reinforcing the norm across the Western Church. You feel the chamber's stone floor pulse like a low drumbeat, underlining the gravity of unity. Fringe rumor survives that a few stubborn clerics smuggled out small bits of Enoch's text, hiding them inside hollowed-out palm nuts, swallowing them at the border to ensure the words reached local hermits. Scholarly debate persists. Historians still argue whether these clandestine smuggling operations represent earnest devotion or elaborate pranks by bored subdeacons, aiming to spice up their desert retreats. You slide your hand along the smooth marble balustrade bordering the assembly platform, its coolness a stark contrast to the warm African sun outside. You overhear two bishops whispering, "What if Enoch's giants are metaphors for spiritual battles?" The suggestion reflects a more allegorical reading, one fringe commentator later claimed. This was the secret rationale that saved Enoch from total destruction, but mainstream doctrine never adopted it formally. You bite your lip, considering how easily a text's fate hinges on interpretive stances. By the time you reach Rome's Council of Trent, centuries later, can almost smell the musty archives where these decisions are archived. Though Enoch isn't explicitly mentioned, the Tridentine canon reasserts the same Old Testament books, echoing those early African synods. You imagine the chain of ink-stained decisions threading from Hippo through Carthage to Trent, unbroken lineage of no thanks to Enoch's fiery visions. Amid these grand councils, you sense other regional gatherings making quieter choices. In Gaul, bishops recall the Galorman tradition of light-heartedly reading Enoch's angel games during carnival feasts, only to slip the scrolls back into locked archives when sober. You nearly chuckle at the mental image of bishops juggling carnival masks and cosmic prophecies. Historians still argue whether such regional customs influenced local acceptance of mysterious apocalyptic. Back in your bedroom, the fan's gentle hum echoes the council's final gavel strikes as if the world itself affirmed Enoch's biblical fate. You feel the weight of the blanket knitting you into the fabric of these decisions. Without a word, you picture the discarded scrolls stacked in dusty attic chests, their corners curling, ink fading, waiting for rediscovery by scholars centuries later, before slipping into sleep. You recall the tiny but telling detail that council scribes tested Enoch's pages in vinegar to see if the ink would bleed crimson, supposedly signifying forbidden blood rites. Verdict: no bleed, no erase, but also no place in the canon. You smile at the blend of piety and paranoia, realizing those ancient debates mirror the mix of devotion and skepticism you navigate online today. You close your eyes, imagining each council chamber as a vast courtroom weighing divine inspiration against ecclesiastical order. You see bishops in solemn robes, offering prayers, passing notes, each gesture shaping what counts as scripture. And though the verdict shunted Enoch aside, those gatherings ensured the text's fate became a defining moment in Christian history. The point when cosmic rebellion and sober orthodoxy clashed under the watchful gaze of incense-laden lamps. You ease back as the fan's steady pulse lulls you into the cool hush of a North African evening. The scent of dust and olive groves drifting in through an open window. It's 419 CE, and you find yourself in the gardens outside Hippo Regis, pacing beside the aged Augustine, whose robes whisper against the gravel. Lantern light spills onto the manicured hedges, setting moths ablaze like living confetti. Augustine has just finished reviewing his latest treatise in City of God, where he contemplates whether fanciful apocrypha, like the Book of Enoch, deserve any place alongside inspired scripture. Mainstream scholars confirm that Augustine never included Enoch in his biblical canon. In his letters, he dismissed it as non-canonical and fanciful, warning that its sensational tales of giant offspring and angelic debauchery risked undermining Christian sobriety. You almost feel the rough parchment under your fingertips as he thumbs through his private copy, though strictly speaking, he insists he's never quoted it in any sermon, out of concern for unsettling the faithful. You lean into a white marble bench, tracing a microchip-sized crack that looks as ancient as Augustine himself. Fringe lore insists that this crack formed when Augustine, exasperated by Enoch's cosmic breadth, cast the scroll onto the bench so forcefully it gouged the marble. Supposedly, monks centuries later found Augustine's edited copy with his thumbs smeared in custard-colored wax, the remnants of a midnight snack, margin notes like too many flaming chariots. Let's stick to floods. You grin at the mental image. One of antiquity's greatest minds, snacking and scribbling. Half terrified of cosmic rebellion, half amused by it. Historians still argue whether these margin notes reflect authentic Augustine annotations or simply medieval monks' pranks. Above you, insects chirp in the hedges as the breeze stirs the flickering lamps. Augustine closes his City of God manuscript and gazes upward, recalling that line in Genesis where Enoch walked with God before vanishing. He muses aloud that if Enoch's ascent were literal, he'd have to explain the physics of an uncharted rapture, something even modern astrophysicists find tricky without a spaceship. You chuckle, imagining Enoch bumping his head on the firmament ceiling. Augustine counters with a sigh. The text's vivid imagery leaves too much room for fanciful heresy's heed. Rather trust the canonical prophets whose authority proved sturdier. You sense the weight of Augustine's authority pressing around you like the soft folds of a heavy cloak. His opinion carried seismic force through Western Christendom, shaping councils that followed. Fringe legend claims he summoned a hyena calling that same beast from James Bruce's Ethiopian test to sniff his scrolls for demonic ink. Supposedly, the hyena yawned, stretched, and wandered off. A cosmic shrug that Augustine took as divine approval of his exclusionary stance. You can't help but laugh at the idea of Augustine petting a hyena like a reluctant zoo volunteer. Historians still argue whether such anecdotes reflect genuine early medieval lore or later. It attempts to romance the story of Enoch's rejection. The breeze swirls fallen petals across the stone path. Augustine speaks of a private visitation, a dream where he glimpsed Enoch's chestnut beard wreathed in starlight, beckoning him to reconsider. Yet he awoke, clutching his head, convinced it was a satirical vision reminding him not to blur the line between holy scripture and overheated fantasy. You almost taste the mint in your iced tea, an anachronistic indulgence, wondering if Augustine would have approved of such a refreshment during theological debates. You lean forward, your palm pressed to the smooth bench, and imagine the soft creak of parchment as Augustine issues his festal letter in 419. Listing the Old and New Testament books for African congregations and intentionally omitting 1 Enoch. This public declaration, combined with earlier synodal decisions, cemented Enoch's fate as an outcast. Mainstream records highlight that his festal letter became a template for subsequent Western synods, effectively barring Enoch for centuries. It's like dropping a viral tweet that shapes every trending hashtag thereafter. You can't unmention it. Once it's lodged in collective memory, across the hedge, you envision wandering theologians pacing, poring over Augustine's reasons that Enoch's calendar didn't sync with Ezekiel's sun-chasing model, that his giants contradicted Christ's pure lineage, that his angelic genealogies fell too close to Gnostic airs. Each objection reads like a modern blog post, comment section, equal parts, scripture, and snark. Historians still argue whether Augustine's motives were strictly theological or tinged with political calculus to consolidate ecclesial authority in the wake of Donatist schisms. Fringe scholars whisper that Augustine's own copy of 1 Enoch secretly contained a hidden palimpsest. Beneath the visible Latin text lay Aramaic lines written in angelic script, decipherable only by monks who drank a special frankincense infusion before reading. They believed this infusion tamed any residual. Watcher curses. You roll your eyes at the mental image of holy libations before manuscript viewing, but it fits right into the tapestry of cosmic paranoia and devotion you've traced so far. Historians still argue whether any such palimpsest ever existed, or if it was pure alchemist's daydream. The lamps gutter as night deepens, casting Augustine's silhouette large against the villa wall. He speaks softly of his pastoral concern that public readings of Enoch might distract believers with sensational displays of flaming swords, serpentine giants, and heaven's riotous council, rather than focusing on the simplicity of Christ's message. You lean back, brushing a trail of hair from your forehead, sensing the same tension that modern preachers face when balancing sensational stories with sober doctrine. You close your eyes for a moment, half imagining that familiar hyena roaming the garden, half feeling the gentle pressure of your blanket. Augustine stands, gathering his scrolls with a final hush. Let Enoch's mystery linger in private libraries and scholarly circles, okay? But let public worship rest on the canonical bedrock. That pronouncement rippled across Europe like a tsunami, reshaping biblical boundaries as you drift towards sleep. You consider the paradox. Augustine, who revered profound mystical experiences, rejected a text that celebrated them so vividly. Yet his cautions preserved a form of doctrinal clarity that many later church leaders found indispensable. Those choices echo today in debates over which voices belong in our cultural canon, whether in literature, religion, or social media feeds. The fan's gentle roar becomes your final lullaby as you picture Augustine strolling into the villa's courtyard, lantern in hand, leaving Enoch's scrolls behind locked doors. You imagine those dusty volumes peeking from shelves in secluded monastic cells, their pages still whispering of cosmic rebellion to anyone daring enough to listen. Historians still argue whether Augustine's exclusion of Enoch was the decisive blow that doomed its canonical prospects, or merely one link in a longer chain of hesitations. But tonight, you felt his skeptical impact firsthand. The power of one man's theological vision to steer centuries of faith, trimming the edges of cosmic wonder to fit a neat doctrinal silhouette. You drift in and out of consciousness as the fan hums its steady refrain, carrying you from Augustine's gardens into a dim medieval scriptorium. The air is thick with the musty scent of moldy vellum and candle soot, each flicker of the tallow wick casting dancing shadows on stone walls lined with oak shelves. Here, Enoch's grand visions have shrunk to tiny glosses in the margins of Latin Bibles, his name scrawled in brownish ink, almost as an afterthought. Mainstream evidence shows that by the 9th century, the Vulgate omitted any standalone book of Enoch, preserving only occasional allusions in Jerome's footnotes. Fringe illuminators, however, snuck his story into psalters. One 12th century manuscript even depicts Enoch astride a fire-breathing dragon, clutching his scroll like a medieval stunt pilot. Historians still argue whether those flamboyant images signaled genuine devotion to Enochic lore or simply a monk's whimsical doodle during marathon copying sessions. You lean forward, feeling the rough-hewn desk's grain beneath your elbow, and almost taste the iron temps of ink as you spot a marginal note whispering, "Remember the pancake rock footprints." A cheeky callback to the Bedouin legends you heard earlier. A novice scribe, bored from transcribing psalms, jotted that reference in green ink, hoping someone would chuckle when they found it centuries later. Meanwhile, rumor has it that a Bavarian monk brewed a watcher's red ale from Enoch's calendrical notes, believing it would grant prophetic dreams. You snort at the mental image of stout monks in stained habits swinging steins aloft, only to wake with hangovers, and visions of giant seraphim doing the chicken dance. Historians still argue whether any such brew ever existed, or if it was merely an insider joke passed down through tavern gossip. The scriptorium's chill presses against your cheek as you imagine Thomas Aquinas' cell in the 13th century. Its tiny window filtered moonlight onto parchment strewn with theological disputations. Enoch never made it into the Summa Theologica's index, despite Aquinas' voracious appetite for angelology. You almost hear the scratch of his quill as he ignores any reference to the Watchers, preferring to debate Michael's rank instead. Fringe lore suggests Aquinas tucked a hidden fragment of Enoch under his bedpost, using its cryptic cipher to cure migraines by reading the text upside down. You grin, picturing the great doctor of the church holding his head and murmur, "Maybe I should have stuck to my heavenly chariot instead." Historians still argue whether such apocryphal anecdotes tell more about medieval reverence for secrecy than about Enoch's real influence. Beyond Catholic cloisters, you drift to a candlelit corner in a 10th century Jewish scriptorium in Babylonia. Here, Enoch lives on as Wanuk, the patriarch of Merkava mysticism. Mainstream scholars note that Sefer Gekalit incorporates Enoch's ascent through heavenly palaces, guiding rabbis through ecstatic visions of chariot thrones. That text glows with ruby red ink on parchment infused with pomegranate juice, leaving a faint tang that reminds you of your bath bombs. Fringe mystics claimed Geklet Rabadi was penned by Enoch himself, dictating revelations and dreams to rabbis who slept on goatskin mats. You almost picture those rabbis waking at dawn, goat hair in their hair, chanting, "Enoch says hello." Historians still argue whether Jewish mystical traditions preserved an unbroken link too early, Enochic materials, or synthesized them with Babylonian lore. You blink as the scriptorium's candle sputters, and suddenly you're strolling the cloistered walks of Mont Saint-Michel in 11th century Normandy. Achaia pilgrims press coins into cracks of the abbey's walls, hoping to invoke Enoch's intercession for safe passage across the bay's quicksand mudflats. Fringe fishermen swear that on blue moon nights they glimpse a spectral chariot floating above the tides, its wheels smashing oyster beds. You can almost smell the briny breeze and hear gulls squawking, as if mocking the idea of a celestial vehicle. Mainstream guides, though, make no mention of Enoch, focusing instead on St. Michael's statue flickering in torchlight. Historians still argue whether local legends of Enoch's coastal apparitions reflect genuine old tales or tourist-tailored embellishments. Time swirls by like ink in water as you find yourself in the dusty reading room of Oxford's Bodleian Library. You trace your finger along the spine of Ms. Bottle 343. A fragmentary Enochic codex misattributed for centuries to Master John of Cornwall. The vellum is still cool under your touch, its edges frayed from candle mists have someone once tried to burn off demonic residue, the parchment curling like bacon. Fringe catalogers labeled it the Book of Lost Light, convinced its pale script held ciphered instructions for summoning unicorn hide scrolls. You grin at the absurdity. Unicorn hide must be the medieval version of flexible vegan leather. Historians still argue whether MS 343 preserves an authentic Second Temple text or a medieval pastiche built from scraps of jubilees and hermetic lore. By the 14th century, Enoch's name surfaced in alchemical circles. Mainstream researchers observe that pseudo-Aristotelian treatises misattributed to Enoch offered instructions for distilling mercury advice, later condemned as too perilous. Meanwhile, fringe alchemists claimed Enoch was the inventor of a rhubarb tonic that cured melancholy, believing that the giant patriarch's dietary notes contained lost gastronomic wisdom. You picture a medieval apothecary stirring a bubbling cauldron, sniffling at the aroma of saffron and hope. Historians still argue whether any genuine alchemical recipes trace back to Enochic sources, or if they simply appropriated his name for marketing flair. As the library's chandelier flickers, sealing the day's last glow, you sense Enoch's presence lingering in footnotes, cryptic colophons, and esoteric manuscripts gathering dust. His text never reclaimed a spot on cathedral pulpits, but those marginalia and pseudo-Enoch works whisper across centuries of scholarship. You press your palm against the vellum rind of a lone codex, feeling its chill seep into your skin, and recall the hyena tests in Ethiopian monasteries, the dragon-riding illuminations, and the pancake rock footprints tucked in Bedouin lore. You realize that medieval obscurity didn't snuff out Enoch entirely. It scattered his echoes into secret rituals and scholarly curiosities, waiting for a renewed spark. Your blanket's gentle weight grounds you back in your bedroom as the fan's hum returns to focus. You've watched Enoch's slow fade from grand visions to fleeting glosses and idle notes, witnessed his tangles with scholastic indifference, and glimpsed his survival in mystic and alchemical detours. Historians still argue whether this descent into obscurity was a conscious suppression or merely the benign neglect of busy scribes. Yet tonight, you've felt Enoch's subtle heartbeat beneath stained parchments and flickering candles, a quiet testament to the resilience of a text too vivid to vanish completely. You breathe in the quiet hush of your bedroom as the fan emits a gentle shush, whisking you away to an airy 16th century lecture hall in Wittenberg. The smell of oiled wooden pews mingles with the crisp tang of newly printed pamphlets. There, pages so fresh they almost stick together. You're perched on a narrow bench beside Martin Luther. His voice rings out like muted thunder as he criticizes what he calls books of dubious pedigree. Glancing at a stack that surely includes the dusty Book of Enoch. Mainstream historians note that when Luther produced his German Bible in 1534, Hea relegated non-Hebrew texts, including Enoch 2, an appendix rather than the canonical Old Testament, marking the first Protestant exclusion by design. Your fingers graze the rough edge of a worm-eaten pamphlet slipped beneath your cloak. Fringe lore claims that a group of rebellious Saxon peasants secretly stapled smuggled Enoch fragments between pages of Luther's Bible, hoping to sneak cosmic visions past ecclesiastical censors. They say one unsuspecting villager tried to. Brew watchers stew from sermon leftovers, convinced Enoch's recipes for angelic fare would cure his gout. You can't help but grin at the thought of a jittery peasant slurping celestial broth while clutching a wooden spoon like a scepter. Historians still argue whether these smuggling operations were earnest religious resistance or mere prankish mischief by bored craftsmen. Around you, Luther pounds his fist on a lectern, the echo vibrating through arched windows into a courtyard full of curious onlookers. A cat scampers along stone steps, its purrs blending with Luther's denunciations of apocryphal fantasies. He warns that Enoch's tales of giants and rebellious angels risk steering believers toward superstition rather than Christ's simple grace. You almost taste the acrid smoke curling from a nearby brazier where clerics burn spines of unauthorized texts. One eccentric fringe account insists they tested Enoch's pages by setting them alight. The scrolls curled like bacon and emitted a distinctly eggy aroma, leading some to suspect they'd been coated in crushed bird eggshells to ward off demon ink. You stifle a laugh at the idea of physicists of faith trying to discern demonic presence by smell alone as you settle deeper into your blankets. You picture John Calvin meticulously reviewing Hebrew manuscripts in Geneva. The room is so hushed, you can hear the scrape of his quill against parchment. Mainstream records confirm that Calvin never endorsed Enoch as scripture, arguing in his institutes that the divine canon must align with the Hebrew Bible's authoritative list, one that excludes Enoch entirely. He emphasized sola scriptura principle, warning that any text not rooted in the prophets or the law could introduce doctrinal rot. You almost feel the cool weight of Calvin's leather-bound folio on your lap, its spine creaking like a tired sermon. Between these towering reformers, young apprentice leans in to share a fringe whisper. He's heard rumors of a clandestine circle in Basel where scholars drank beer brewed with hops, supposedly blessed by reading Enoch upside down. They claimed the inversion unlocked hidden cosmological codes, guiding them to perfect brewing ratios. You grin at the absurd mashup of theology and brewing science, tempting enough to justify a weekend brewery tour. Historians still argue whether such Basel beer Bible experiments hold any historical truth, or are simply modern reconstructions of tall tales. Beyond Wittenberg and Geneva, scores of Protestant princes in the Holy Roman Empire ordered new ecclesiastical libraries there, curators zealously selecting canonical texts. One Habsburg librarian famously compiled a blank ledger labeled Enoch's Exclusions, a notebook with empty pages representing books banned from pulpit readings. Fringe rumor has it that he inscribed the ledger in invisible ink, visible only under moonlight during equinoxes. You chuckle, wondering if his moonlit reading sessions ever led him to misplace his quill among the shadows. In Anglican England, Thomas Cranmer oversaw the 1549 Book of Common Prayer, which structured worship around selected scriptures. Enoch's absence created a silent question mark in morning readings. Scholars note that Cranmer's theological circle debated, including readings from the Apocrypha where some Enochic fragments circulated in Latin translations, but ultimately chose to omit them. You almost taste the chalky tang of medieval grammar school slates as you imagine Cranmer's scribbles on margin notes. Enoch's too spicy for Sunday breakfast. You recline as the fan's hum deepens, recalling Erasmus's scholarly side glances at Enoch references during his Greek New Testament work. Though he championed ad fontes to the sources, he never advocated for Enoch's restoration, dismissing it as a celestial novelty best left to footnotes. Fringe commentators claim Erasmus kept a copy of Enoch under his pillow, believing its arcane verses warded off nightmares about academic rivalries. They say his cats refused to sleep near his desk, convinced the text summoned spectral seraphim. You picture Erasmus scolding a sulky feline. Not tonight, Clara. I'm translating the Gospel of Thomas instead. Throughout these debates, Protestant polemicists lambasted Catholic indulgence of extra-biblical writings, casting Enoch as emblematic of papal excess. You feel a curious chill, like your blanket just turned into a pamphlet war. Clerics in Strasbourg and Zurich staged public burnings of volumes they called angel porn for their lurid depictions of heavenly rebellion. Some Protestant artisans fashioned wooden grotesques of watcher angels on printing presses, cautioning readers not to be seduced by giant drama masquerading as prophecy. Historians still argue whether these spectacles reflected widespread theological conviction or were opportunistic displays by local authorities seeking to showcase Protestant fervor. The candle beside your nightstand flickers as you recall one peculiar story. A rebellious printer named Johannes Faust allegedly included a hidden woodcut of Enoch riding a dragon deep inside a Protestant Bible. It remained undiscovered for centuries until a modern restorer found it sandwiched between Isaiah, and Jeremiah. He claimed the dragon-riding Enoch was Faust's private signature, a wink to anyone brave enough to question censorship. You smirk, imagining Faust hiding among the typeset, giggling as pages flew off the press dot back in your bedroom, the fans. Whoosh becomes the distant roar of printing presses, churning out Bibles across Europe. You feel the weight of history pressing you down, as though the collective force of Reformation theology has smothered those once fiery Enochic visions. Yet in that smothering, you sense a quiet undercurrent. Small groups of clandestine readers still memorized Enoch's prophecies, trading verses and whispers during midnight services. Historians still argue whether these pocket traditions influenced later esoteric movements or simply reflected nostalgic longing for hidden knowledge. Your eyelids flutter as you realize that the Reformation's clear-cut boundaries enforced a new scriptural discipline, but it also sparked unintended curiosity. By striking Enoch from the text, reformers taught readers to treasure what vanished, fueling secret zeal for its cosmic wonders. You almost catch the faint aroma of musty pamphlets mixed with hops from Basel beer and olfactory memory, anchored in both piety and playful rebellion. With that, you stretch your toes beneath your covers, feeling the cool cotton slide against your skin. The dim glow of your bedside lamp softens, and you sense how the Reformation's harsh assessment of Enoch echoes into modern questions about which voices we include or exclude from our cultural canons. Tonight, you've walked the print shops of Luther, shadowed Calvin's study, and flicked through Cranmer's margin notes, witnessing how Enoch's fate was sealed by reformers, determined to keep their scripture lean and focused, yet paradoxically fanning the embers of Enochic fascination. In the margins, your mind drifts, as the fan's hum steady becomes a lullaby. You know the next stops lie in the lone outpost of Ethiopia and the modern scholarly revival awaiting you. But for now, you rest in the quiet aftermath of Reformation zeal, comforted by the knowledge that even in rigorous exclusion, Enoch's story refused to vanish, completely smoldering in hidden footnotes and rebellious heartbeats. You're cradled by the fan's soft hum as you're swept into the highlands of Ethiopia, where misty plateaus stretch beneath soaring peaks and the scent of enset bread drifts through open windows. Imagine a sun-warmed courtyard in Lalibela, its red rock churches carved like giant inverted chalices. Inside, one dim, lantern-lit nave. You press your palm against the cool stone walls and witness a community for whom the Book of Enoch is not a curiosity, but scripture. Read aloud alongside Genesis and Psalms. Mainstream scholars confirm that the Ethiopian Orthodox Cato Church has included one Enoch in its biblical canon since at least the 5th century CE, preserving it in Ge'ez alongside Enoch's 5 major sections: the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. These texts stand in equal liturgical status with the rest of the Old Testament, read during feasts and fasts. Their passages chanted by priests, draped in emerald-sprinkled robes. You almost taste the tang of spiced Tejmeed as you watch a deacon unfurl a heavy vellum scroll atop a low lectern. The iron gold ink seems to wink in the lantern light, perhaps a callback to the meteor dust ink margins you encountered in medieval manuscripts. Its fringe lore insists that Ethiopian scribes once blended crushed opal into their ink, believing the iridescence kept watchers from stealing heaven's secrets. You grin, picturing a scribe carefully stirring unicorn hide binders, though that's probably an exaggeration of earlier baptismal jokes about mythical leather. The room resonates with the low drone of Gia's recitation, each syllable rolling like distant thunder. It feels familiar, almost like that subtle ripple of chants you heard in Qumran's caves, but here it's amplified into soaring harmonies. You lean forward, catching a whiff of frankincense mingling with roasted barley. From a festival outside, the text's vivid imagery leaps off the page. Watcher angels teaching magic to humankind. Fiery chariots racing across the sky, Enoch's ascent on beams of light. These scenes aren't relegated to footnotes, but pulsing with communal life. Curious footnote finds its way into local tradition. Fringe pilgrims claim that during the Timcat festival, a hidden shrine in the Simeon Mountains reveals an underground chapel where Enoch's original Sealand obsidian disc, inscribed with angelic characters, glows faintly under the glare of torchlight. They say if you press your ear to the disc, you can hear the murmur of cosmic courts still at debate. You can't help but smirk at the image of travelers kneeling before a rock on a wet, windy night, hoping for audio intel from heaven's legal system. Priests in Lalibela consider Enoch's calendar authoritative, using its 364-day solar reckoning for setting feast dates and agricultural cycles. Mainstream accounts note that this liturgical calendar persists alongside the broader Eastern calendar, a living relic of Second Temple sectarian practice preserved in the African highlands. Scholars still debate whether this unique calendrical fidelity reflects an unbroken Enochic tradition brought by Jewish Christian migrants, or a later adaptation by Ethiopian theologians seeking distinctive identity. Outside, the echo of church bells competing with bleating goats stirs you back to earlier chapters. Remember, the chained temple dogs guarding Enoch's scrolls, or the hyena sniff tests in Gondor. Here, the guardians are tablets replicas of the Ark of the Covenant shrouded by priestly cloth as they're paraded through the village, reminding you that Ethiopian reverence for sacred scrolls extends to every corner of life. Fringe storytellers claim that during one procession, a goat mistook the tablet's cloth for a sacrificial blanket, bleeding in fury until priests recited Enochic verses to calm its spirit. You chuckle at the thought of a bleeding goat forcing impromptu exorcism. You follow a candlelit procession winding through narrow alleys, the faithful's footprints echoing like soft drum beats on stone-paved streets. Midway, a young monk in a saffron tunic pauses to illuminate a new Enochic manuscript in a workshop. You catch the scent of pomegranate ink and the sharp click of quills against reed palettes. He murmurs a curious detail. Some Ethiopian communities believe that Enoch's tomb lies beneath a church in Axem, and if you leave a loaf of injera overnight at its entrance, the next morning you'll find the bread stamped with celestial runes. Mainstream travelers note no such phenomenon in guidebooks, but the anecdote lingers like a sweet aftertaste. Inside the workshop, frescoes depict Enoch standing beside King Solomon, advising him on temple rites, a quirky contrast to the usual focus on Davidic narratives. Scholars still argue whether these Ethiopian iconographies reflect genuine historical traditions or were adopted from Coptic art imported via Red Sea trade. Regardless, these murals transform Enoch from a marginal footnote into a direct interlocutor with kings, reminding you of the regal manuscripts in Qumran and the prophetic scribes of Jerusalem. At dusk, you join a night vigil where ancient chants invoke Enoch's pleas for mercy on behalf of humankind, his name rolling on lips like a secret password to divine favor. The crackling of torches outside blends with insect choruses, converging in a lullaby that feels both ancient and immediate. You're struck by how Enoch's banishment from other canons only deepened. Ethiopian devotion like starved children craving a lost toy. They hold Enoch's visions more dearly because no one else would. You settle on a worn bench, hearing the soft patter of candle drips and the gentle murmur of prayer shawls brushing stone. The sense of communal affirmation feels profound. Here, exclusion elsewhere became a magnet, drawing Enoch's text into a unique sanctuary. Fringe tradition even credits Queen Makeda, the legendary Queen of Sheba, with commissioning the first Ge'ez translation at the instruction of Solomon's ghost. Ensuring the text's arrival in Ethiopia, you grin at the whimsical thought of a phantom Solomonic scribe dictating apocryphal verses by moonlight. As the vigil closes, sense the fan's hum returning to your bedroom, the world outside your window, silent. You've felt the warmth of Ethiopian fireside readings, smelled the pomegranate ink and tej mead, and glimpsed the obsidian seal rumored to whisper celestial secrets. All of this underscores a rugged reality. While every other Christian tradition shuttered its doors against Enoch, Ethiopia flung theirs wide open, preserving a text that might otherwise vanish entirely. Historians still argue whether Ethiopia's embrace of Enoch represents an isolated anomaly or a relic of early Christianity's broader, more pluralistic landscape. You press your forehead against the cool stone of the church's threshold, feeling the same gentle pressure your pillow offers. The echoes of chants fade into your mind's ear. And you realize Enoch's sanctuary here isn't just about preserving scripture, it's about forging identity, claiming cosmic heritage where exile became devotion. And in that hush, you sense that, centuries after councils and silence silenced his voice elsewhere, Enoch speaks as loudly as ever in the songs of Ethiopian worshippers and the ink of their sacred scrolls. You nestle into your pillows as the fan hums like a cosmic metronome, whisking you from Lalibella's incense haze into a sunlit, mid-20th century excavation tent by the Dead Sea's salt-crusted shores. You squint against the glare, bouncing off the lake's glassy surface, imagining Bedouin shepherds stumbling upon clay jars hidden in a cave jars that would soon transform the Book of Enoch from whispered legend into a living text once more. Mainstream history records that in 1948, the first Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed, including Aramaic fragments directly quoting the Book of Watchers, proof that one Enoch circulated among Second Temple Jewish sects over 2 millennia ago. You almost taste the gritty residue of desert dust on your tongue as scholars gingerly lifted those rolled scraps. It's preserving carbonized bits of text that predate medieval Ethiopian copies by 1,000 years. You feel the thrill of connection. As the fragments' edges brush your fingertips, digital imaging beams scan every fiber now. It's translating ink stains into pixels while you binge-watch your favorite true crime podcast on a tablet perched precariously on your nightstand. Fringe rumor insists that one scroll fragment showed a doodle of Enoch wearing aviator goggles, hinting that he charted UFO routes between heaven and earth. You grin at the notion ancient pilot logs scribbled in divine marginals. But no. The real excitement lies in confirming Enoch's early popularity among sectarians. Historians still argue whether these fragments represent a direct line to an original 3rd century BCE text or reflect later community redaction by the same Qumran copyists who revered Daniel and Isaiah. Someday, you imagine sitting in a seminar room at the École Biblique in Jerusalem, the air scented with chalk and academic ambition, watching René Morris Schaff's 1957 facsimile of Enoch fragments projected onto a screen. You catch a whiff of musty library air, peppered with the faint aroma of coffee left cooling in chipped mugs by sleepy doctoral candidates. Mainstream scholarship credits are H. Charles's 1912 English translation for sparking initial Western interest. But it was the Dead Sea Scrolls that revalidated Enoch as a genuinely ancient work, not a medieval oddity. Meanwhile, a quirky subplot unfolds in your mind's eye. Whispers on archaeology listservs claim that a CIA field agent nicknamed Watcher 1 intercepted a clandestine shipment of Enoch fragments destined for private collectors, ensuring they landed instead in the Rockefeller Library vault. They allege the agent used a hollowed-out copy of Gone with the Wind as a smuggling container. You laugh at the spy novel flourish. But consider how geopolitical intrigue often follows the trail of any text promising secret apocalypse maps. Back in your bedroom, a blanket's weight anchors you as you imagine bustling translation workshops. In America and Europe, you picture Michael Anib and George W.E. Nicholsberg poring over multiple Ge'ez and Aramaic witnesses, annotating variant readings, one column for Ethiopian traditions, another for DSS scraps. The rustle of paper and click-clack of keyboards feels like modern scribes breathing life into dusty words. Historians still argue whether the Book of Parables, with its messianic Son of Man imagery, originated in pre-Christian Jewish circles or emerged as a Christian-layered interpolation. Debate as polarized as any online comment thread. A mug of chamomile tea cools by your bedside, its floral aroma mingling with the fan's steady hum. You almost taste the leftover sweetness as you imagine flipping through the 1978 edition of the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, where James Charlesworth assembled every Enoch fragment known at the time. Scholars celebrated that volume like a blockbuster franchise. Debating which sections were earliest, are the astronomical books, star calendars, a genuine 3rd century BCE astronomy primer, or a later Hellenistic overlay. Fringe enthusiasts insist the star charts encode coordinates for hidden temples beneath the Sahara. But mainstream experts caution that reading cosmic treasure maps into an apocalyptic text is a stretch. Historians still argue whether those calendrical tables reflect genuine temple sect practice or astronomical speculation by scribes. Fascinated with lunar solar cycles, your eyes drift shut for a moment, but the narrative tugs you back post, scrolls. Enoch studies exploded. Universities created dedicated Enoch seminars where students argued over translation, as passionately as fans dissecting their favorite TV shows. You almost hear the soft click of PowerPoints as a professor highlights the animal apocalypse symbolism, equating horned beasts with ancient Israel's kings. Someone in the back whispers, "If only Netflix commissioned a documentary." And you chuckle, picturing Enochic streaming wars. Tonight, you're mindful of a fringe tale that a university library once recorded phantom footsteps outside its. Enoch Studies wingbooks fell from shelves unbidden, as though the watchers themselves protested misinterpretations. Archivists allegedly found pages strewn about, each displaying a single word: beware. You grin at the dramatics. Yet modern critical editions sometimes feel just as haunted by open questions and variant readings. Mainstream publishers have since produced annotated bilingual editions, layering Ge'ez, Aramaic, and English in parallel columns, and artisans' delight for text geeks. You can almost feel the glossy pages under your fingertips, the smell of new paper and promise. Yet, despite these restorations, Enoch remains officially apocryphal in nearly all Western churches. Historians still argue whether renewed interest has altered denominational attitudes at all, or simply fueled academic curiosity without shifting liturgical norms. A warm breeze slips through your window, ruffling curtain edges like a silent page. Turn. You imagine attending a lecture at the Society of Biblical Literature annual meeting, panels debating Enoch's influence on Judeo-Christian angelology, others exploring its impact on later Islamic traditions. You almost taste the spicy blend of cardamom and espresso as attendees swap notes during the coffee break. Fringe critics suggest that Enoch even shaped modern New Age cosmologies, claiming it foretold drones and satellites interpretations skeptics dismiss as retroactive hype. Historians still argue whether the Book of Enoch inspired the Watcher lore in the Da Vinci Code, or if that's purely Don Brown's creative license. Your fan's rhythm slows as you approach the edges of wakefulness, and you reflect on a poignant, mainstream takeaway: the Dead Sea Scrolls, Enoch. Fragments confirm that this text circulated among the same communities that preserved Isaiah, Zechariah, and other canonical prophets, underscoring that Enoch never truly stood on the fringe before. Yet fringe whispers persist, imagining missing DSS scrolls hidden in private vaults, awaiting revelation in some remote Himalayan monastery. You smile at the mix, genuine scholarly breakthroughs, and the ever-present lure of tantalizing conspiracy. As you drift, you sense the text's journey tightening into focus, from a brief Genesis cameo to oral legends, Ethiopian codices, medieval marginalia, Reformation burnings, and now high-resolution scans and international conferences. Enoch's revival in modern scholarship spread like a patchwork quilt, each new fragment or translation adding texture. Historians still argue whether we'll ever reconstruct a single original text, or if what we have is a beautiful palimpsest reflecting generations of devotion and debate. Your eyelids flutter shut. The fans hum now, a cradle song. You've glimpsed the 20th century renaissance of Enoch. Desert caves yielding fragments, scholars racing to translate and annotate, fringe tales peppering academic lore, and ongoing debates that keep the text vibrantly alive as the last flicker of consciousness ebbs. You realize this renaissance is itself the latest chapter in Enoch's story proof, that a work once banished can rise again through the combined efforts of dedicated seekers and scribes. You drift as the fan hums a gentle undertow, carrying you back through the layered corridors of history you've already traversed. Hugh's Genesis cameos, Ethiopian sanctuaries, Synodal gavel strikes, Reformation bonfires, and the pixel-bright scans of 20th century scholars. Now you find yourself suspended in that twilight space where a text both vanished and endured, its absence as resonant as its presence once was. It's here, in this intangible gap, that the Book of Enoch's haunting legacy takes shape. Mainstream scholarship acknowledges that Enoch's exclusion from most expousal biblical canons hinged on concerns about provenance and theology. Unnamed councils repeatedly flagged its obscure origin and sensational angelology as risking doctrinal confusion. You can almost taste the bitterness of those bishops' ink, steeped in caution as they penned canons that left Enoch's pages out in the cold. At the same time, you feel the spark of their era's conviction, as if their pen strokes themselves crackled like smoldering coals unnecessary, containment of cosmic fire. Yet fringe whispers assert that the very effort to suppress Enoch only magnified its allure. You imagine secretive sects murmuring his cosmic visions beneath cloistered arches, scribbling his verses on coffee-stained napkins in smoky taverns, even sketching his watchers in margin doodles that survive only in stray scrapbook fragments. Those playful echoes recall the pancake rock footprints, the dragon-riding illuminations, and the hyena's uninterested sniff tests, each a token of Enoch's indomitable flicker. Historians still argue whether Enoch's apocalyptic visions were sidelined as too radical for a consolidating church or merely incidental casualties of broader canon-shaping politics. That open question crackles with energy, like the unsolved ending of a favorite mystery novel. You bend closer, feeling the cool mattress beneath you, and recognize that Enoch's real legacy lies precisely in that unresolved tension, his disappearance. Carved a vacuum that beckoned seekers to wonder, what truths lie just beyond the edges of our authorized collections? You sense a whispered harmony rising from centuries of clandestine devotion. In an Irish folktale, villagers recall a wandering judge quoting Enoch under a harvest moon, believing his warnings warded off locust swarms. That quirky tradition jars with the weighty deliberations of synods you visited earlier. But both testify to one thing: exclusion never equals erasure. Whether in Ethiopian liturgies or Gaelic harvest rituals, Enoch's words persisted as living sparks, igniting curiosity and comfort in equal measure, in modern bookshops. You might find Enoch nestled between chapters on occult symbolism and comparative religion, its spine whispering of cosmic rebellions. Whisperers on internet forums debate which fragment is original, interpolation, each hypothesis as electric as ancient marginalia. Historians still argue whether digital editions with side-by-side Ge'ez, Aramaic, and English bring us closer to an authentic text or simply layer more complexity onto an already intricate tapestry. You almost hear the soft click of your mouse, feel the synthetic glow of your screen as it echoes the lanterns of Judean scribes. The paradox endures by confining Enoch to the periphery. Ecclesiastical authorities preserved a potent zone of fascination. His text became a gateway to speculation. Secret collusion of angels, cosmic calendars, antediluvian giants, cosmic courts, and divine scrolls. You recall the flick of margin doodles in medieval psalters, the Basel beer experiments, and the CIA style smuggling tales, quirky breadcrumbs that lead to the heart of cultural imagination. Each anecdote, mainstream or fringe, resonates with that core fact. Enoch's story refused to die as your eyelids grow heavier. You realize Enoch's exclusion has become a feature, not a flaw. It taught generations to seek beyond their standard playlists, to savor apocryphal riffs on sacred tunes. His absence, animated passions, clandestine manuscripts, late-night online debates sustaining a community spanning centuries and continents. It's a testament to human curiosity. The more you lock away knowledge, the more tenaciously people will pry it open. You sense the final echo of Enoch's legacy in this very moment. As you hover between wakefulness and sleep, you've traced how decisions made in marble chambers, desert sanctuaries, and print shops shaped a text's marginal fate. Yet tonight, you recognize that Enoch's true domain was never confined to any register of canonicity. It thrived between the lines, in the spaces left by decisive declarations, where imagination reigns. And so you rest, cradled by unanswered debates and whispered traditions. Enoch's silhouette lingers at the periphery of authorized scripture. A gentle reminder that every canon is framed by choices, some deliberate, some inadvertent. His disappearance attests to the power of mystery itself. And his enduring presence proves that stories once told never vanish completely. Now. As your breath slows, let the edges of this tale soften. In the hush of your room, you're no longer bound by counsels, cylons, or scholarly footnotes. You're simply tucked beneath a blanket that feels as secure as the church vaults that once shelved Enoch's words. Let each syllable of this whispered goodbye dissolve into the gentle hum of your fan, carrying you into a space where boundaries blur and questions breathe freely. Rest in the quiet assurance that some stories wander beyond official gates. Gathering in the soft pockets of culture, trust that the curiosity sparked by Enoch's vanished pages reflects a deeper longing and urge to glimpse the infinite even when the door slams shut. Here, there's no rush to decide, no urgency to determine authenticity. Instead, you linger in open possibility. Feeling the gentle tug of mystery cradle your thoughts. Imagine those fringe scribbles, the hyenas, the dragon illuminations, all settling like stardust around you. They remind you that wonder often thrives in the margins, in overlooked corners where imagination can grow wild and free. Allow your mind to drift along those unseen threads, tracing the faint glow of candlelight in distant monasteries and the silent chants in Ethiopian caves. Feel the tension ease from your shoulders as you release the weight of inquiry. The debates, the councils, the contested verses, they all recede into a soft horizon. What remains is a simple truth. Stories endure in the spaces between certainty and doubt, whispering to those who listen. Now, let your eyelids close gently. In the lingering quiet, let yourself dissolve into slumber, carried by the soft chorus of ancients and dreamers. Sweet dreams, dear listener. Asterisk, end of script.